You're not procrastinating because you're lazy. You're procrastinating because your system keeps choosing the path of least resistance, and nobody ever showed you how to reprogram it. That's the real problem. Not your character, not your willpower, not some fundamental defect in how you were built. The system is misfiring, and until you understand why, every productivity hack you try is going to feel like putting a fresh coat of paint on a broken engine. Procrastination isn't a character flaw, it's a default state. Your brain isn't broken. It's running an outdated sequence that consistently prioritizes short-term comfort over long-term output. And the frustrating part is that the sequence is working exactly as designed. It's just designed for the wrong environment. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly why the system misfires, what's actually happening underneath the behavior, and what needs to change before discipline can even begin to take hold. Let's start with what procrastination actually is, because most people have it wrong. When you delay a task, most people assume something is wrong with their motivation. They think they just don't want it badly enough. But research on this consistently points in a different direction. Procrastination is primarily an emotional regulation problem, not a time management problem. When you avoid starting something, you're not avoiding the task itself. You're avoiding the feeling the task produces. That might be the feeling of being overwhelmed. It might be the fear of failure, or the discomfort of uncertainty, or the frustration of not knowing exactly where to begin. The brain, operating on the oldest part of its wiring, reads that discomfort as a threat and roots you away from it. Scrolling your phone, watching one more video, reorganizing your desk, these aren't acts of laziness. They're the brain doing its job, which is to move you away from what feels bad and toward what feels safe. The system is functioning. It's just calibrated to the wrong goal. There's a structure in the brain called the limbic system, which handles emotional processing and threat response. It's fast, it's automatic, and it doesn't care about your deadlines. On the other side, you have the prefrontal cortex, which handles planning, long-term reasoning, and impulse control. When you feel threatened or anxious, the limbic system can effectively override the prefrontal cortex, which is why smart people with clear goals still find themselves unable to start the work they know matters. The emotional part of the brain wins the argument before the rational part even gets a word in. This is the misfire, not laziness, not a lack of ambition. The circuit gets tripped before you ever have a chance to consciously choose. And here's what makes it worse. Every time you successfully avoid the discomfort by doing something easier, you reinforce the loop. The avoidance behavior gets rewarded with relief, and your brain logs that as a successful strategy. So the next time that same uncomfortable task comes up, the pull toward avoidance is even stronger. You're not getting weaker. The pattern is getting more practiced. Now let's talk about why standard advice fails to address this. Most productivity advice operates at the surface level. Wake up earlier, use a timer, break the task into smaller pieces, make a list. These aren't bad suggestions in isolation, but they don't work if you haven't addressed the emotional trigger underneath the avoidance. Telling someone to just start when the act of starting is what produces the threatening feeling is like telling someone with a broken ankle to just run faster. The instruction makes sense in theory. It just ignores the actual problem. The Pomodoro technique, habit stacking, accountability partners. These tools can be genuinely useful once the underlying signal is managed. But before that, they're just adding more structure to a system that's still routing around the discomfort. The reason so many people try every productivity method they can find and still end up in the same place is because they're treating the output, the delayed action, without touching the input, which is the emotional signal driving the avoidance. So what actually works? The first thing that has to change is how you relate to the discomfort itself. Not eliminating it, because that's not realistic, but changing your automatic response to it. When you notice the urge to avoid something, that signal is information. It's telling you that the task feels threatening in some way. Getting curious about what specific feeling is being triggered, boredom, fear, uncertainty, shame, lets the prefrontal cortex back into the conversation. You're no longer just reacting. You're observing the reaction, which creates just enough distance to make a different choice. This is sometimes described as affect labeling in psychological research. The act of naming an emotional state can reduce its intensity. When you put language to what you're feeling, you're engaging the rational brain, which partially counteracts the override from the emotional response. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but the mechanism is real. You're not suppressing the discomfort. You're processing it in a way that doesn't require avoidance to resolve it. The second shift involves reducing the activation energy required to begin. Not by making tasks easier in the motivational sense, but by removing the decision cost from starting. A large portion of avoidance happens not during the work itself, but in the gap between thinking about doing something and actually doing it. That gap is where your brain runs its threat assessment and often concludes that now isn't the right time. The way to shrink that gap is to reduce what's required to take the first physical action. This means the environment needs to be arranged so that starting a task requires almost no deliberate effort. The friction of beginning has to be lower than the friction of continuing to avoid. This is why you see research supporting things like putting your gym shoes next to the bed or leaving a document open on your screen before you go to sleep. It's not a trick. It's a friction audit. When the environment makes starting easier than not starting, the system's calculation changes. The path of least resistance becomes the right path, at least long enough to get moving, and motion produces its own momentum. The third piece, and the one that gets skipped most often, is the relationship between identity and behavior. The brain doesn't just respond to tasks and environments. It responds to the story it's running about who you are. If part of your self-concept includes being someone who struggles with follow-through, then avoidance becomes self-consistent. You're not failing to be productive. You're succeeding at being who you believe you are. This is why people can overhaul their systems repeatedly and still return to the same patterns. The system changed, but the identity underneath it didn't. Shifting this requires building evidence in the other direction. Small, consistent actions that the brain can register as proof of a different story. Not motivation-based, not inspiration-based, just repeatable actions that accumulate into a new data set about what kind of person you are. This is a slow process and it doesn't feel dramatic while it's happening. But identity-level change is what makes behavior change durable rather than temporary. The reason most people keep restarting the same productivity cycle every few weeks is because they're changing behavior at the surface while leaving the identity underneath it untouched. And since the brain is constantly scanning for evidence that confirms what it already believes, any break in the new behavior gets used as proof that nothing has really changed. The cycle repeats. What you're actually dealing with when you procrastinate is a system that's doing its job based on outdated instructions, an emotional threat response that flags discomfort before your rational brain can weigh in, a reinforcement loop that gets stronger every time avoidance succeeds, and a self-concept that may be quietly confirming that this is just how you operate. None of that is laziness. None of it is weakness. It's a system running a sequence, and systems can be updated. The next time you catch yourself avoiding something you know you need to do, don't reach for guilt. Reach for curiosity. Ask what the avoidance is protecting you from. Name the feeling. Lower the friction to begin, and start collecting evidence, one small action at a time, that the sequence is changing. Because it can. The system isn't fixed. It's just waiting for better instructions.